Blessings, my friends. This is God's promise to us for rest. This is God's promise to give us rest. And this is one of my favorite scriptures of all time because I've had to depend on this scripture throughout different spots in my life in some very big ways. And so I just want to read it for you now. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. And these are Jesus' words. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And here's the promise, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I don't know what you're going through right now, my friend, but what I do know is that this world is crazy. You'll continue to hear me say that over and over again. I know that there's some good things happening in the world, so I don't want to sound pessimistic. But from a realistic perspective and also from a spiritual perspective, the world is chaotic right now. And there's all kind of forces at work that are wearing people out, wearing people down. There's a lot of people that want to give up on life. I don't know if you've ever been there. I have a long time ago coming out of my military deployment. I know what it is to be on the verge and be so overcome with different things that you just don't know what to do, so you would rather even not be here. I've been to that point. I hope you haven't been to that point, but if you have, there's still God. God is still there for you. I laugh in the midst of that statement because God reminded me of how good he was to me during that time and how he showed up. And I know that he can show up for you the same way. I want to read the scripture again. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. Come to me. That's the first part. That's what Jesus says. When you're weighed down by the burdens of this world and the craziness of this world, the first thing we have to do is come to him. Unfortunately, sometimes we do the exact opposite and we go trying to find peace and trying to find solace and trying to find help in every place else except coming to him. And Jesus says this ought to be your first step when this world and when life becomes overwhelming. Come to him. That's the first step. That's the first step. Come in your bedroom, fall on your face. You don't necessarily have to get down into a prayer posture unless you're able to do that and unless that's where you are. But you can fall flat on your face and say, God, here I am. Here I am. I need you. I need you desperately. He says, come to me. And then he wipes away all the barriers and all the loopholes that the world would give us. He wipes all that stuff away, right? All the superficial criteria of life. You have to be this, you have to be that, you have to have this kind of education, this kind of money. Jesus wipes all that stuff out and he says, he makes the playing field easy. He says, all you who are weary and burdened down, that those are the only prerequisites to get rest from God. To be weary and to be burdened down, which really means to be worn out by the craziness of this world, the daily grind of this world, and then man's inhumanity to man in this world, people's inhumanity to people in this world. That stuff will wear you out. It'll wear us out. Jesus says, "Come to me." If you're in that state right now, if you're in that situation right now, unfortunately, he says, "Here's the answer. Come to me." And the promise is, I will give you rest. Now, we got to qualify something here because when Jesus says rest, he's not talking about sleep. He's not talking about the body and the mind being rejuvenated and replenished from 6 to 8 hours of sleep. He's not saying that at all. He's talking about a soul weariness right here. He's talking about a weariness that comes from having problems in life that money can't solve, that connections can't solve, that your wisdom, your smarts, your intellect can't solve, who you know can't solve, what fraternity, sorority, group you belong to can't solve. Those kind of issues right there that keep us up at night. That's the stuff that causes our soul to be weary. And soul weariness is much different than the body being tired. This is the kind of rest he's talking about. He's not saying you need more sleep. He's saying you can't sleep because your soul is tired. And this is what makes it tired. Verse 29, he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me." Let me just stop right there. In agriculture and in the world of farming, and they still have it in some of the more rural places, they still use animals to do the farming. In the more modern places, they use machinery to do what animals used to do by themselves. So the way it used to be is that they would have oxen, two big oxen, right? Walking side by side. They would put on their necks this huge piece of wood, probably about 6 inches thick and about, I think, about 6 feet long. And then they would cut holes in it somewhere around the 2 foot mark on each side. And they would put the oxen's neck in the holes, right? They put a hinge on it for it to open up and close. And they would put the oxen's neck in the hole, each oxen. So you had two oxen walking side by side. The only problem with that is that sometimes one oxen would be bigger than the other, which means that that oxen would be much more stronger. So that oxen would start to pull harder, and everything would become uneven. And that's where we get the scripture of being unevenly yoked. You can't walk together unless you're of the same mind and pulling together at the same time. So the smaller oxen would have a heavy burden on it, even to the point where its neck would be choking somewhat because this other oxen was pulling so hard. And then in some cases, it was just the opposite. It was just the opposite, right? That this oxen was so weak that it was causing the stronger oxen pressure upon its neck, a heavier burden, because there wasn't an equal sharing of the load that was being pulled. This is what Jesus is implying here. He's saying that the yoke that the pressure that the world puts on your neck is unbearable. Go to work every day, come home every day, got to take care of the kids, for you got to do this, you got to do that. And it's a never ending journey. And you wonder, when is it going to let up? When is it going to be my turn to even live a little bit, to even really have some rest for my soul and some time for myself? This is what he's saying. The pressure that the world puts on us, it's relentless. It doesn't let up. It doesn't let up until you die a physical death on this side of life, unless we come to Jesus and we allow him to give us rest for our souls. This is what he's saying in this text. He's saying the burden is so heavy because you've taken upon the wrong yoke. You believe too much in what this world is offering and believing in some cases too little in what I have to offer, but what it is that God has to offer, what it is that Jesus has to offer is the solution to this life and to the life to come. Just take my yoke upon you and then learn of me. Watch how I do it. Watch how I handle this pressure. When he walked this earth 33 and a half years in the flesh, he says, learn of me, study my life, learn of me. Look at how I handled the pressure from the Pharisees and from the Sadducees and from all of the stuff that came at me, even the pressure of eventually having to go into the Garden of Gethsemane. And I was thinking about the fact that I had to die on the cross for the salvation of humanity. He said that was pressure. It was so much pressure that I sweat drops of blood. That's how much pressure it was. And I really didn't even, my flesh didn't want to go through it, which is why I cried out, Father, if there's any other way this cup can be taken from me. And then he says, the mission kicked in, the God who I am kicked in, and I realized I saw all of humanity and the brokenness of humanity from the first Adam until the last person that will be born, and the fact that they be born in sin and have this weight, this pressure of the world upon them. And that's when I said, "Okay, Father, you don't have to take it now. Thy will be done. Thy will be done." He says, "Learn of me. Learn how I handle pressure." And then he says, "I'm gentle and I'm humble." He's saying, I'm the exact opposite of the world that you live in. You live in a hostile world that's far from gentle and far from humble. It's the exact opposite. Instead of gentle, it's harsh. It's harsh. Everything is harsh. And instead of humble, it's arrogant. He's saying that's the stuff that causes depression, that causes anxiety, that puts a heavy weight on your life. It's like, can you even find any good people in this world? Any nice people, any kind people, any people speaking the words of God in this world, the words of life that bring peace and joy to your heart, as opposed to people just spewing out negativity every single day. He's saying, take this upon you. This is where you'll get your rest for your soul. And when you get soul rest, you'll start having the best sleep you ever had in your life. And then he concludes with these words of verse 30. He says, "For unlike the world," he says, "my yoke is easy." For my yoke is easy. He says, living a life for me, when you really give your life to me, and when you really yoke up with me, when you really let me put my yoke in my neck in one side of the yoke, and you put your neck in the other side of the yoke, it's not like those two oxen that cause each other trouble. He says, when you yoke up with me, I'll carry the load and I'll make things so much more easier for you. And this is God's promise right here to give us rest, soul rest. And maybe as you listen to God give me these words right now, maybe you're realizing that that's what you've been needing all along. You don't need more sleep medication. You don't need more ZQL. You don't need all of that stuff there. Your soul needs rest. And that rest can only come by us coming to Jesus and taking his yoke upon us, doing away with the world's yoke. Yes, we still have to be in the world, but not of the world. Give the world back its yoke. It's too much pressure. We're not built to handle that. And take his yoke upon you, my friend. Learn of him, and you'll find out what I found out. His yoke is easy, and his burden is light. He'll lift the load off of you, and you'll look up and you'll realize that you've been rejuvenated in a way that you never thought you could. Oh my God, my soul feels good just telling you this because I know what that is. So you be encouraged. This is God's promise to give you rest. And when God gives you rest, you automatically gain strength for the journey. Blessings, and be encouraged. Share this with somebody else who needs to hear this message. Please share it with them. Thank you.